Greetings, everyone. Opencode is a month-long open source event, a flagship offering of Geekhaven, the technical society of IIIT Allahabad, bringing together various domains of computer science and software development, from FOSS, AIML, cybersecurity, to web development and app development, blockchain to design, competitive programming to game development. It provides an ideal platform for students and enthusiasts. Opencode is a month-long open source creative solutions event, and in doing so, flagship offering of Geekhaven. Here at IIITA, it is our core belief that technology holds the key to unlocking new opportunities and advancing human society. And Opencode'25, in its ninth iteration now, is our testament to this mission. Fostering a passion for technology among students, Opencode invites budding developers from across the nation to showcase their skills, gain experiences, and advance their careers. With this, my dear audience, I take great pleasure in welcoming today's speaker, Mr. Rajat Jain, the founder of BQuant.dev, an online platform focused on providing structured learning, mentorship, and community for students and professionals aiming to break into the much coveted competitive quantitative finance roles. He's an ex quantitative researcher at Tower Research Capital and, as mentioned, the founder of BQuant.dev. A computer science graduate and valedictorian from BITS Pilani, he has spent several years and accrued invaluable experience working in high performance trading teams. On to you, sir.
Hello, everyone. Um, as Utkarsh already mentioned, I'm Rajat, and my talk today is going to focus on how to quant. And this is for all of you who want to break into the field, who love maths, code, and most of all, money. I mean, if it was not for the money, I am pretty sure you'll be pursuing far greater objective like general AI and making the world a better place through product startups. But here we are. um, I'll give a brief introduction about myself. A lot of this Utkarsh has already mentioned in his intro. I graduated in 2019 with computer science from BITS Pilani. Almost did a master's from CMU, but life happened and I ended up joining as a quant researcher and developer in Tower's fast-paced trading teams. Moved to New York back in 2022 and helped bring Tower to my alma mater, BITS Pilani, as a uh, placement company. In some ways, coming back to Triple IT Allahabad is also a homecoming from for me, because I remember back in 2015 when I was about to join as a student, I actually ended up coming to Allahabad wanting to join Triple IT, even though I had a seat at BITS, and then someone from your college, a senior, told me, "What are you doing here? Go to BITS, take a dual degree," and the rest is history. Um, I At Tower, I spent 6 years solving hard problems, problems that needed to be solved in nanoseconds instead of what a normal software engineering problem would be in milliseconds or in seconds. Um, Quit, came back to India, started building bquant.dev, and the aim here is to increase the quant culture across India and hopefully across the globe, and also to help students like you break into the field. And of course, I still love algorithms, markets, and teaching all the students who love to hustle and learn. So, before we dive into the thick of it, we must first separate what quant finance roles are really like. So, there are multiple categories, and usually people separate them in buy side firms versus sell side firms. Sell side firms are firms that you have all heard of, probably. They have big client bases. They are Goldman Sachs, Barclays, Deutsche Bank, etc., etc. These are firms that would sell financial services to whoever is willing to buy them. It could be a broker like Zerodha in India, right? Or ICICI Bank, or anyone who is selling a financial service and making a commission off of it. Even your VCs can be considered in some like there are funds that actually end up selling the fund outside, right? They'll have outside investors come in and invest into the startup, so they can also be considered a sell side firm. Then come the buy side firms, and these are the firms which we are going to focus on mostly during this talk. The buy side firms are usually any firms that will buy securities or services on behalf of an another investor, right? So these could be again, going from hedge funds, mutual funds, venture capital, to firms like prop trading desks. So these are firms that do not have, like, a lot of these firms may not have clients, for example, Tower, HRT, Jane Street, who would just use their own money to trade. But the distinction essentially is that they are the buyers of securities and services. And this is going to be the majority of what we're going to talk about. So, not about the Goldman Sachs quant analyst roles, but more quant traders. A lot of these firms are highly coveted. You'll hear, for example, firms like HRT, Jane Street, Tower, Optiver throwing around um, crores in fresher packages. And this is what I believe Utkarsh meant when he said that this is the coveted part of quant finance. And with this, we'll dive into what even is a quant at these firms. Quant usually is a broad term, at least in these firms. Quant could mean a quant developer who writes ultra low latency, high performance trading systems. This could be a person who is essentially um, making sure that you are able to connect to exchanges. So you could think of all work as there's a strategy which is a function that takes money and prints more money. And now what you need to do is wire this function up and to market data, to networks, and to various other um, things so that a trader can write this business logic without knowing how it's connected to an exchange and how his models are getting executed in a low latency manner. So essentially, everything around this function is designed by the quant developer. Let's go to quant researcher. A quant researcher builds a mathematical model for training. Think of this like a typical machine learning job. You have a supervised input where you know that the stock price after a second is going to be X, and you have multiple features that you can use to train on this X. You could use any machine learning model because this is a supervised learning problem. If you look back 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you'll have all the data that you need to predict 1 second, 5 second, or even month-long returns. And you use this supervised data to kind of build machine learning models. These are truly big data problems in the truest sense because you have all the data in the world about from all the financial markets, which means that at the end of the day you have petabytes of data, and it it is important for you to know what features affect the price of the instrument that you are modeling. And that is where the challenge comes in here. And a quant trader essentially takes this function, right, which the quant developer has wired to the exchange, takes a model which is built on mathematical foundation by the quant researcher and fills out this function. So this function is gonna execute, it's gonna get the market data, it's gonna run the model and execute trades based on risk, what the market looks like, what the behavior is in that particular market. There are different markets across the globe, and they all behave very, very differently. And a trader combines the knowledge of his experience in the market along with the output of the developer and the researcher to kind of write the final trading strategy. In a lot of firms, they'll merge the role of a trader and a researcher. Probably sometimes they'll also merge the role of a developer and a researcher. And there are some pods that I've seen which will merge all three. The trader does the dev and the research. And these people often work at high frequency trading shops, hedge funds, prop shops, and these are all the typical companies that you have heard of, right? Very, very infamous for the packages that they give and very coveted to break into. So, within these firms as well, there is a big taxonomy of where you end up. All firms are not equal, and the place where you are at kind of rewards different things. And once you enter into one of them, your career is kind of shaped by where you are at. Essentially, if let's say you are on the bottom left of this graph, it will be incredibly hard to move to the top right and even like change quadrants. And that is because the roles themselves look very different and the payouts for those roles are very different as well. So let's take, for example, firms on the bottom left, right? So the x-axis specifies the frequency of trade. This is how fast your code runs, how fast you want to trade. Let's say you want to listen to every single event that's happening in the market and trade on a nanosecond frequency. That would be the high frequency side of things. And if, let's say, you're predicting returns that are 1 day out to a month out to even a year out, you are actually trading on a very low frequency because your predictions don't change all that fast. And like the small minutiae of data do not matter, right? Because you are looking at the macro events as opposed to the micro events, right? And this is where the role also changes a lot. On the low frequency side, because you are predicting returns that are probably days out to weeks out or even minutes out, uh, the dev work here does not require you to do work in like optimize things in nanoseconds. You're probably fine optimizing in milliseconds and sometimes micros, but never nanos. And that's because all that data does not really matter to you.
Predicting
All that granularity does not matter to you. What matters to you is actually the scale, because you are now looking at macroeconomic events. The amount of data that you can ingest from correlated markets, from a lot of other sources, is very, very high. And consequently, that leads to platforms that are bulky, a little bit slow because they need to process a lot more data. And in turn, the quant researcher job gets extremely hard because you are now predicting returns that are days to months, and you are now building very, very complex models like neural nets or deep networks, um, and training them on GPUs to make sure that you're able to predict returns and generate alpha. So these are models that will have a lot of parameters, will require a lot of data to train, and then will require a lot of data to predict what the outcome is going to be. So again, things are going to run a little bit slower, but the models are going to be much more complex. On the high frequency side, the models, because you're looking at things event by event, from the dev perspective, things tend to be a little bit fast. You need to be very, very cognizant about every single branch statement that you put, cache locality, um, various other factors that will help you optimize. For example, the optimization level in the compiler, how it's removing stub code, and how the compiler optimization is ultimately making your code run better. Things like false sharing play a role here. And here you would need to be truly a master of the machine in order to achieve the highest frequency possible, because you're looking at every event and you're trying to react to every single thing that happens in the market. Consequently, the models here tend to be simpler, because, for example, a neural net can take seconds to kind of give you a prediction. We have all seen LLMs being crazy at this, like ChatGPT takes 5 to 10 seconds to act to give an output at the end of the day. And in the high frequency world, that just doesn't work, because you are predicting things on a microsecond or on a nanosecond level, and your model must execute all that fast because that dominates the time for you to make a prediction. So the models tend to be simpler, they tend to be smaller, they tend to be more explainable, but the dev work tends to be a little bit of a beast on its own. And that's where you see firms on the right side like HRT, Tower, Jump kind of competing to be the fastest in the world and really, really react on every single event. As soon as they see an opportunity in the market, they'll try to enter, make money, and get out as fast as possible. They're not holding things for days or weeks, as opposed to the world quants or the TGS or the Renaissance of the world. They are actually just holding for a second or 5 seconds or even lower than that. Then we go to the y-axis. So this is not as much of a career changer as opposed to the philosophy at which these firms run at. Some firms are siloed. They have individual P&L attribution. What that means is that the trading teams within these firms do not talk to each other much. The siloing, again, depends on the firm that you are in. For example, as you can see, Millennium, World Quant, and Tower seem to be the most siloed firms, where teams really do not talk to each other. And what that means is that the firms kind of the trading teams kind of act as mini firms, and they keep a larger cut of their own P&L. They are kind of in contract with these companies to kind of say that, you know what, I'll I'll make X% of whatever profit I make, and the firm makes the rest. Um, so there is a big eat what you kill mentality, where if you're making a particular amount of profit, you're entitled to a percentage of that, as opposed to the other side of things, which we'll discuss shortly. Firms like these tend to have small pods where one person can wear many hats. If we go back one slide, I told you that some firms tend to kind of amalgamate the roles of developer, researcher, and trader. Some will amalgamate two of them. And you'll see that a lot in the siloed firms, where because these teams are small, a developer from team one does not necessarily talk to a developer from team two. So these two developers are kind of building, could be building the same thing actually. And the learning here for the dev could be really, really high, because they can actually wear a lot of hats, can learn how to be a quant dev, how to be a quant researcher, and maybe even a trader. That was certainly the path I took at Tower. Um, on the other hand, the collaborative firms, they kind of have essentially one large desk, right? They'll have teams that trade separate things, but if I am trading CME, then my team is the only team that trades on CME or any particular exchange. For example, in Tower or in World Quant, 50 teams could be trading the same instrument, but not at these other firms. Um, all the people will collaborate together in order to generate alpha. And essentially, what happens is that any PNL that you make is the firm's PNL. And then the firm kind of decides um, the bonus structure. At the end of the day, what this incentivizes is for people to become masters of their own skills. Whereas when you were in a siloed environment, you would actually wear many hats and kind of try to become a specialist of sorts in all three things, but have relatively surface level knowledge. When you are in a collaborative firm, you'll end up specializing in one thing, because that is the one thing that your team needs you to do, and they don't have a dirt. If there are two devs, they can work on different projects as opposed to the other firms, as opposed to the siloed firms. So what ends up happening in these firms essentially is that you can actually just specialize in one particular processor, or you can have systems that you specialize in essentially, or you can have models, and you can have products that you can specialize in. And as a result, like if you are in the lower left of the graph, it's insanely difficult to move to the top right, because your experience is very, very different, and vice versa, right? A researcher who's used to building large models and complex models would have an insanely hard time trying to build smaller and faster models while retaining a level of um, predictiveness, essentially, right? Small models work fine in high frequency because you are really predicting not that far out, right? So they work, but for a person who has predominantly worked in the low frequency side of things, it's hard to transition. So again, which firm do you want to go to? Which side do you want to go to? The answer is whoever gives you an offer. There is really no pick and choose here, but it is important to know what kind of work you'll be doing while or before you end up entering that place. If you have options between two of them, then you may want to align yourself to core philosophy, whether you love building large models, whether you love getting into the deep part of the systems to kind of extract the most performance out of things. And those philosophies kind of can dictate where you want to join. So how does a quant role differ from the SDE roles, right? Um, and the difference is quite a lot. The team size in a particular quant firm is really much smaller than a big tech SDE like Google, Amazon, Microsoft. You can look at the employee counts. The largest quant firms are 2,000, 3,000 people, but Google has around 100,000 people, if not more, right? So the responsibility on a quant is much higher than a big tech SDE, and the pay is great. But as you can see, it's not on the same scale. You don't get paid 4 times as much, but yeah, the responsibility is there. There is a good growth path. Uh, the by the virtue of having a low amount of people, the hierarchy is flat. You get large amounts of responsibility early, and your growth is fast. Big tech is more of ladder climbing. You'll see websites like levels.fyi that show you levels on in different trading in different tech firms. And these levels are at the end of the day like defined by how many number of years you've been at the firm, um, how many of like 5 rating have you received, is the firm growing overall. So the growth is slower in general, but it is also more uniform. If the firm grows at an average 10% year on year, you can very well assume that your career will grow at a 10% average year on year. The work life balance is something that the industry is very infamous for. Uh, as a quant, your work life balance kind of, again, by the virtue of having a high amount of responsibility, um, is a little bit bad than big tech SDE, where I have seen people love the work life balance. Um, Pay variability is also a little bit different in these two sectors. The pay in quant is extremely performance based. In a year that you do not perform, a lot of the times your actual comp will go down, and everything is kind of tied to how much profit the firm made, the company made, or like the trader made that you are supporting. If you are a trader, how much profit you made. Um, while in big tech, your pay is really experience based. Of course, there is a ESOP component of how well the company does, but there is really no pressure for you to kind of earn the money, right? Impact in quant is direct. You deploy changes overnight, and this is me actually being a little bit generous. Sometimes I have made changes and deployed them within minutes in production, and changes move the revenue immediately. You could break something in production and lose millions, and you could put something in production and suddenly start making a lot more than you were. Um, Impact in big tech is indirect. You can be working on a very small feature in a very large product. For example, the send button on Google Hangouts. And those features may be A B tested and they will take months to reach users. They may be noticed, they may not be noticed. And essentially, you're working in a big tech thing, you're working on a very small segment of a large product. So it would feel that your direct impact on revenue is just not there. It's all just indirect work when it comes to affecting the revenue. And just to break into these roles, the interview difficulty for big tech is medium, where you do DSA and systems, and that's all. But when you're trying to break into quant, you really need to dive deep into DSA, systems, C++, puzzles, s- computer architecture, etc. And the interview processes are long and arduous. Now, why do I bring these differences to the forefront? Over time, I have realized that the quant side of things is glamorized a lot, but it is not really for everyone. If you are a person who feels that direct impact is important to you, if you are someone who feels that you should be rewarded based on your hard work, on your performance, and you want to impact the firm's bottom line, um, and you want to be rewarded for that, then quant is definitely the place for you. I have had friends who don't mind working the 50, 60, or 70-hour long work weeks, mostly because they really enjoy seeing the green line move up, seeing that their changes are actually making the firm and by extension them money. And they know that whatever they help the firm with, it is going to reflect in their compensation as well. Meanwhile, on the big tech side, things are again, it's a different kind of a person, but I have friends who love to travel, who love to enjoy life. The salary difference is not extreme, right? And there are friends who would choose a 30-hour work week and peace of mind when it comes to kind of having one bad year, and kind of, taking it slow, traveling around the world, making use of all the unlimited PTOs that a lot of firms provide. Although nowadays, with the market being bad, I guess people still get fired. But there used to be a time a couple of years ago where like these jobs didn't really fire people, if at all, right? So again, it depends on who you are, right? If you are willing to put in the hard work and want to be rewarded for it, then big tech is probably not the place for you, because the things there are a little bit more structured and a little bit more hierarchical, and you will be away from those direct changes. If you're someone who loves life in general, love to have a good work life balance while not sacrificing on pay all that much, and would love the fact that your comp keeps increasing steadily year on year, um, then big tech is the place for you. You would end up becoming a manager sooner in big tech as opposed to quant, because usually in quant people end up remaining individual contributor for a long time in their careers. And whereas in big tech, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, you become a manager, and your individual contribution goes down, uh, and you start impacting the firm in general. So, how do I prepare? Usually, I would say just lead code, lead code, lead code. There is really no um, way around it. At the end of the day, all of these firms, regardless of whether they're SWE or quant, would end up asking you lead code or competitive programming questions. A lot of people think that your competitive programming rank matters, your rating matters. It doesn't. As long as you are able to solve the interview questions well, you will be selected. The difference is that there might be people who are better than you who are giving that exam, and then they end up getting selected. So there is a selection bias there. But as long as you're good at lead code, you should be able to break into these roles. Um, with in general, you are required to have good coding and system design skills, and need to have a good grasp. If you're going for quant research roles, you need to have a good grasp on probability, linear algebra, and combinatorics. At beacon.dev, my aim is a little bit different from all the other platforms out there, where I tend to write down articles from my experience, where we have a article for, let's say, we have a mini um, computer science degree called CS for Quants, and we have um, courses like low latency C++, statistics, machine learning, which kind of focus on having videos and pedagogical content to teach you those concepts and then test you with questions, right? And these would be the questions that have been asked across a lot of interviews. At this point, I have probably given and both taken more than 100 interviews, if not 500. And I feel that I can draw upon that experience to write all that content down in a way that makes it easy for you to kind of reach a level where you should be able to solve these questions much more easily. So, how do we help? As I said, this is one of the basic C++ roadmaps that we have. We have video lectures in these, notes, and interview style questions. As you can see, we start all the way from the C++ compiler, what it is, how do you install it, all the way to the advanced features. And then this is just one of those roadmaps. We have an advanced C++ roadmaps that goes all the way to memory mapping, fault sharing of cache lines, multi-programming, and atomics and system design. So we take you from probably like first year of college knowledge to getting you ready for these interviews. Is it possible to apply off campus? Yes, it is. Do not apply to job boards. There are very few companies that respond to you. There are some good ones that do, but in a lot of cases, you are just throwing your application in a black hole. You should reach out to any alumni that you have in these firms for referrals. And what I am also trying to do with the quant.dev is that have our top performers get referrals to quant companies. We are flying out a few people this week actually to kind of have them interview. And this is something that is like just starting to take shape. And I hope to grow this side of the platform as well um, as things progress. And that's my time. Any questions you have, anything, feel free to ask.
So we have a few questions here. Uh, what drugs? What skills should a student focus on early if they're interested in quant dev?
So, as I said, the very first thing that you need to start doing, probably as soon as you start college, is make a lead code account. Like, you really, really, really need to be good at DSA, because at the end of the day, if a company comes on campus or even off campus, the very first round is always going to be an online assessment, which is most likely going to ask you to invert a binary tree. Not that, but like some hard question from lead code, right? That is something that you just cannot skip. And once you have done that, or once you have gotten into a habit of doing that, I would really advise you to kind of go through the roadmaps that we have, which kind of deal with all the knowledge that is required to get into the field. So specifically, what we focus on is the intrinsics of C++, and by extension, the systems, operating systems, computer architecture, and networks. These are the things that such companies care about a lot, as opposed to stuff like databases, for example, which probably a software company does care about, but not as much in quant, for example. So we tend to kind of, I've tended to kind of distill all of that information on how to prepare to kind of build this entire roadmap, because over the 6 years that I was in Tower, I actually got this question probably 100 times, and this is the question that precipitated me to kind of build that roadmap and make sure that, if you are in your first year in college, you have just finished your basic C programming course, you can enter and start learning.
And we have a follow up to that. What mistakes do you commonly see students on the platform making while preparing for quant roles?
So the biggest mistake I see is that they just delete code, even though like that is the first thing that you should. The problems I have seen all over all the interviews that I have taken, one is that the students kind of tend to be a little bit weak on the theory aspects of things. Why does something work the way it does? And I mean, I have had a lot of my colleagues flabbergasted by the easy questions that I ask, but I have asked questions to people like, what's the difference between a struct and a class in C++? And I have had a 90% plus rate of students fumbling that question. And even though to some of you it may seem like, how is that even possible? Um, I'll ask you to keep in mind that we are usually interviewing the top 100 or top 1,000 AIRs also, and even in them, we have like a 90% misprediction rate. And if you think you know the answer, you should actually check out Google, because you may know the wrong answer for this question. And to remedy this, that is why like I started writing this long form content to kind of make sure that these mistakes don't happen. The second thing I feel is getting nervous under time constraints. it is very, very important to kind of practice solving problems in a timed constrained manner whenever you have an interviewer breathing down your neck, um, and you feel that this is a very, very big job that I have been trying to get to an interview for, and this is the only firm that is taking an interview, and if they don't, I'm going to lose out on a big offer. You tend to be a little bit worried, and that is shown to the interviewer. Some interviewers tend to help, but most don't understand that this is a big deal, and if you fumble, that can kind of cost you the interview. And I have seen people being so stressed that they'll stammer, or they'll just answer things wrongly. They'll write wrong code and then say, I have never done this, but I don't know why I'm writing this right now, because I feel like it'll work this way, but it's not the best programming practice. So to remedy this, I think the best is to have all your fundamentals cleared. If it takes college lectures to do that, do that. If it takes any online material to do that, do it. And then practice under timed constraints.
Abdul asked the question: do quant companies have some official or special platform for off-campus placements?
Not really. And that is what I'm trying to do at this point, really. Um, the companies don't have an official or even an unofficial platform. That is mostly, it's even an issue for experienced hires. So let's say if I wanted to change my job, or my friends wanted to change a job, they really do not have a good means to do so, without reaching out to third party recruiters, which is a hit or a miss. And the idea that I have had over the last 6 months is to kind of build an end-to-end platform that helps people prepare and also helps place them in good companies. And so far, the companies have also been kind of receptive to it. It's a new thing and for them as well. And we are trying to grow that way.
Uh, Another question: how different is the entry barrier for quant devs? They say that for AI/ML, generally you require a master's or a PhD, right? So there's an academic barrier. Is there any barriers or odds for quant roles?
Not in India. So these firms are usually global, but you would have seen a lot of Indian names in the list that I had earlier, Alpha Grep and Securities, etc., etc. But even for the global ones, in India, people usually do not do a master's or a PhD, and the firms are very cognizant of that. And the barrier is not so much the education that you have. The barrier is the competition that you have for these seats. You can think of it as JEE all over again, right? These firms intrinsically have a low capacity, and I have seen my peers from not that great engineering colleges get in. I have seen peers from great engineering colleges not get in. At the end of the day, what matters is your prep and how well are you able to solve the interview questions as opposed to the other people in the group that the company is selecting from.
Adding on to that question, from a resume standpoint, what realistically matters more for these quant firms?
I would say the very first thing that we see is the GPA. And that matters mostly. I mean, I have been a proponent of the camp that GPA doesn't matter, but my manager put it very succinctly at Tower, where he said that if a person has a high GPA, he has a very high tendency to do things that he doesn't like. So even if he gets a bad project, he'll do it, right? And he'll do a good job at it. Whereas you can have a person with a low GPA with great skills, but they do what they like, right? And in a lot of cases, you will not have projects that you like, and you may just, it does not show resilience towards things that you do not like. And I feel like that is a very good take on it. It's a very healthy take on it. And so the first thing that matters is the GPA. And after that, really, the resume screening process is really just to see whether you have something interesting, whether you have done some decent projects. And in a sea of resumes, what puts you as a separate entity could be like some national level achievement. But once you get to the OA stage, really all candidates are equal. Um, I have, at the very least, never seen someone get preferential treatment after they get to an OA. The difference is it is possible, like the chances of you getting an OA can change depending on your resume.
New question now. Uh, how really is the work-life balance? You mentioned it in passing, but they want some details. What really does that mean on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, so as I said, like a quant in general has a lot more responsibilities by the virtue of the team sizes, and they tend to hire very, very exclusively. So people tend to have very high pride in their work, and they usually want to contribute as much as they can. And the reason for that is that your compensation is tied really to how much you contribute to the firm, right? So at the end of the day, if you contribute more, you get paid more, which means that everybody wants to work more or less, right? So this leads to these firms having a lower team size in general. So the largest firms that I know of have like 3,000 to 4,000 people. Maybe there's someone who has reached 5,000, but that is a very small number. And the projects here, as I mentioned, are as much technically complex as our projects in SDE, if not more so, because you are really diving deep into the bare bones system, passing all the kernel protections and building things on your own. And this adds a level of technical complexity that even ChatGPT at this point is not able to solve, right? So you end up having to research more, you end up having a lot more responsibility, you end up having to deploy it yourself. Um, and this leads to naturally longer work hours and more stress, right? If things break in production, then as a person who has been usually responsible throughout your life, you will be responsible, you will feel responsible for things that you break. And as I said earlier, um, I feel like when you start at a SDE firm, you start probably trying to put in 40-45 hours a week, but then realize that that is really not required, as most people are putting in 30 to 35 hours a week. And on the flip side, you'll see quants start putting in 40, but then very quickly go up to 60, uh, if not more, right? Again, firms differ. You'll find software firms where people are working 72 hours a week. There are very famous founders saying that. And you'll find quant firms where people have it relatively chill because the firm is making a lot of money. And when times are good, people usually do not need to work as much. But overall, the work-life balance loss is mostly a function of you wanting to work, not people making you, forcing you to work, and you wanting to work because you have an intrinsic belief that any amount of work you do translates into either better comp or better opportunity to grow within the firm.
This is a personal question of mine. I've often heard that that there is pretty low retention. That it's pretty, as you had mentioned, that it's less the firm pushing things on you and more you wishing to work for them. That there's really cutthroat culture. That if you're in the bottom 10, bottom 20% of the performers, you'll have to be laid off or shifted to another team. Is that really what happens?
I mean, I can say from my experience, I've never heard of it. To be very honest, I've heard some firms may do it, but I have like never talked to someone in the industry who has been personally affected by it. And the culture tends to be cutthroat depending on where you are at and where the team is at. But in general, as long as you're performing, things are fine. um, I don't think people are looking to cull specifically bottom 10%. I know that even like some software companies have this culture, but to be honest, I have never really heard from anyone in the industry who's getting fired just because they were in the top bottom 10% when the firm was doing really, really well. Let's say the firm makes triple the amount of money that they make usually, and then someone was in the bottom 10% even though they doubled their P&L. I am hard pressed to think that they'll be fired, because if a trader gets fired, that could be a real revenue loss for the firm because there's no one to run that strategy.
RK asks, we often hear about quants from the buying perspective. How does, on the day-to-day basis, does the process differ for seller-side firms generally?
So seller side firms, again, I'm not the best person to probably ask. I have a lot of friends on the sell side, but I have never really worked on the sell side. From what I understand, the work hours are just as grueling because they have client relationships where they have to kind of be available for all their buy side clients. And the buy side clients, like these firms are not forgiving. They would want some particular deliverables from you, and they will want them pretty much at the same pace that they would do it. The difference essentially is in the fact that these firms tend to be much, much larger. Their hiring bar seems to be lower, and that kind of tends to affect comp. They are run more like a software company as opposed to a quant company. You'll work on a particular segment of things. You'll work on a small part of a product. You'll probably not run the whole product yourself. You can think of things like big big banks, right? Like big banks like even ICICI and HDFC in India would probably run a lot slower than the startups, right? And that really is the difference. When you talk about the culture, etc., as well, there is a lot of red tape as well, because banking in general, the buy side is heavily regulated by the government, and when that happens, things tend to grind to a halt.
A personal question for you. Did having a no attendance policy work out in your favor? That do you think it's a part of your success that you weren't forced to go to class?
I personally believe in the no attendance policy. I think bits, like even though personally I probably had like a 99%, if not I didn't have 100%, like very close to 100% attendance, but um, I still had areas where there were competitions that I did where I missed classes, I missed exams, not worrying about having an attendance criteria, and we won on the national level, we won on the international level, etc., etc. Mostly because of that policy, because that kind of gives you the freedom to at least think that you have control of what you want to do, even though you are not making use of that control. And I have had friends who have made use of that control and are like have running their own companies and are doing really well in life in general. I personally believe that if you're getting selected in a great college, the top 20, 25, 30 colleges in India, um, you are probably one of the most hardworking people in the country. So having an attendance criteria on you just doesn't do anything. And if somebody really does not want to learn, then they really don't want to learn. Having an attendance again won't help. So it personally helped me, and I feel that that should be the norm that all Indian colleges adopt. Much like the universities outside India, they also don't have any attendance policy, and they're the top universities in the world.
Very, very seconded. But another question: what type of projects should be included on a resume for a prospective, quant attendee, whatever?
Um, I mean, anything that I prescribe is going to be generic, and generic doesn't sell well, right? Uh, if I tell you that you should build a stock market predictor, and people have tried that, right? uh, the difference is that it should be something that is unique, that shows your passion towards building stuff. I feel that I have seen resumes where people are not doing stuff directly related to quant, but maybe someone doing very good in cryptography, winning olympiads there, very different. We loved his profile, and that is a profile that I still remember. So if you have a project that really you are passionate about, and you have worked a lot on it, those should definitely be included. It doesn't need to be on a quantitative side. um, so yeah, I mean, just work well on what you love, and that should kind of show through on your resume. Also, do not include any course projects. Like that is an instant giveaway, because we are looking at the resumes from the entire college. And I mean, it's very evident when like 30 people write a compiler, right? Like it's the college projects. We just discard that.
Uh, Philosophical question now. What advice would you give to someone for their mindset, where who's intimidated by the competition or comes from a non-IIT background?
I mean, so this is something that I have personally adopted, and I feel that more people should too. Is the fact that I feel that there is intrinsically everything is a function of working hard, as opposed to um, like somebody being intrinsically better than you. I feel that if someone else can do it, then you can too. And it the difference lies usually in one, the will to do hard work, and two, the access to resources. So let's say when you were doing your coaching or when you were in college, your access to resources is wildly different from someone else in a different city doing a different coaching or in a different college. And that is really where the difference comes from. But at the end of the day, if you're willing to put in the hard work, and if you're willing to challenge yourself, and put yourself in uncomfortable situations, that is always going to be more rewarding, be it quant or not. But if you are someone who is watching this and who feels like, I am lagging behind my peers, or like there is some invisible person who is better than me in XYZ and I can't make it, I'm feeling intimidated, throw yourself in situations which are uncomfortable, participate in a competition that has like PhD level students, and see where you land. Participate in lead code or like code force competitions. Do something different, like don't need to run the rat race, do something different, be go on a international hackathon. You never know what you're going to win, right? And um, this is a philosophy that I kind of adopted throughout my college life, and I have adopted throughout my career as well, where we participated. As I mentioned earlier, we had an international competition that was from Microsoft, where we won the national level, etc., etc. It was a competition with PhD students. No second year had ever won it, and we tried. I did not know anything. Like I did not know the D of development at that point in time when I just closed my eyes and dived into the competition. So my advice to you would be just follow the learning, put yourself in uncomfortable spots, and you're going to see beautiful results.
And I think that's a great line to end it on. Thank you so much, sir, for providing us with your time. And thank you so much to the audience who's been with us, who's been watching, who's been asking so many questions. The VOD for this will be live on the YouTube channel for you to refer later as well. Once again, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Utkarsh. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks for having me. Have a good day. Take care. Bye bye. So, do I stay or?
No, I think it's done now. I'll just verify just a second.
Okay. How was it in general? Was it fine?
Oh, it was very human. Normally, these sessions they become a little robotic. It's all the same. So it was quite fun hearing from a recent graduate, who's pretty fresh in the field, and also it was fun. It was very, as I said, it wasn't as robotic as other sessions usually tend to be.
Uh, I felt, yeah, it's a little bit weird not having an audience because I look at, um, like I have a habit of looking at cues from the audience. So that kind of always keeps throwing people off, like throwing me off at least.
I mean, that's just the entire thing about Zoom classes, keh lo, ya फिर pre-recorded webinars. But yes, by the way, you were asking, yeah, the streams ended. If you wish to, you will need to meet. It was really wonderful having you. Thank you so much, sir.
All righty. Take care, Utkarsh. Have a good day. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Can you send me the link for this?
Yeah, I'll have one of our coordinators send it to you.
Sure. Perfect. Thank you.